finally, you're in a healthy relationship with someone who is emotionally stable, emotionally available, ready and willing to meet your needs, ability to have healthy conflict. And after relationship after relationship where you didn't get any of those things, perhaps you were gaslit, taken for granted, used, manipulated, the list could go on. And now you're wondering, okay, everything is healthy, everything is stable. Why do I still feel triggered? That's what we're going to talk about today. Why we feel triggered in relationships that are healthy and stable. Hit that like and subscribe button and let's get started. Let's first talk about what it even means to be triggered, because there's a very big difference between being triggered and just being uncomfortable. So trigger is anything, some sort of stimuli, whether that is a person, place, experience, feeling that sparks intense negative emotions. And typically our emotional response to the situation is more intense than the situation permits. So, for example, if our partner is someone who likes to take space during arguments in order to collect their thoughts, that can be a trigger for some people. And if you're feeling triggered, you might notice that your heart rate starts increasing rapidly, that you have overwhelming sadness or rage. You might feel nauseous, you might start shaking, you might feel dizzy, you might have chest pain. So from an objective standpoint, we can say, of course, people deserve and need to take space at times when things feel too overwhelming in order to come back in a regulated state and have a hard conversation. But if we're the other person in that conflict and this is something that is triggering for us, we're going to have an emotional response that is larger than the situation calls for. So these triggers can be different for everybody depending on the experiences that you've had in the past. A good key indicator to know if something is triggering for you is if it's difficult to regulate yourself in that moment. So the biggest question of them all, why does this happen? Why is this happening when I'm in a healthy relationship, when my partner isn't doing anything that's actively harmful, manipulative, or intentionally hurtful? If you haven't already, I would recommend looking at my attachment videos that I've already posted, and I will tag them in this video. Our attachment system helps us detect safety, danger, and threat through a process called neuroception. This process is completely subconscious and is programmed to detect behavioral cues in others to help us decipher who is safe and who's not safe. So if we're typically used to unsafe relationships, whether that is an attachment system that was formed when we were a child or when we were an adult, our system is going to be on high alert to catch any sort of threat or danger that's coming our way. So that being said, objective behaviors that could be categorized as safe might feel unsafe to an attachment system that's used to primarily picking up danger cues. When we have relational wounds or we've been through relational trauma, it's really difficult to separate the past from the present. Something that I always tell my clients is that our nervous system doesn't age with us. So if past hurts, past traumas, and past harmful memories go unprocessed, our nervous system will react just as if that situation was yesterday. In order to give you a better understanding of the way our nervous system works, the way the brain works, I'm going to use a smoke detector analogy with the amygdala in the brain. So our amygdala is kind of like a smoke detector in that the smoke detector in your house will go off if you are cooking a grilled cheese and you burn it a little bit, but it'll also go off if the house is in flames. So just like your smoke detector, your amygdala can't tell the difference between real and perceived threat. So what happens is when we get triggered, our amygdala goes off, the smoke detector of our brain senses a threat and creates an emotional response in order to protect us. So when we do feel triggered, it's typically because that situation has reminded our nervous system of old wounds or is representative of needs that we have. An example of being triggered because of unmet needs might look like your partner having a really healthy and happy relationship with their family members, and perhaps that's not something that you received in childhood, and perhaps that's also something that you don't have in adulthood. Although objectively, your partner having a great relationship with their family is amazing, subjectively, that's triggering because it reminds you of the needs that you have that went unmet and continue to go unmet. Something to be aware of is that all couples have conflict, and the presence of conflict does not mean your relationship is unhealthy. Naturally, the most intimate of relationships are going to touch on some of those old wounds, and it's more so about how we deal with it. In fact, safe, healthy relationships are the perfect place to start uncovering some of these old wounds and working through them. So how do we move forward? Something that's going to be super important when moving through this journey is called corrective emotional experiences. And essentially what that means is that you have an experience that challenges past hurtful or traumatic experiences. So for example, if part of your relational trauma is you being used to the silent treatment every time someone was upset with you, within your relationship, creating a healthy dynamic where you can reconstruct your relationship with space. Within that partnership, you can learn that space can be something that's healthy and helpful, not always something that's damaging and harmful. You can learn that you are able to rely on other people, able to be vulnerable, allowed to have your own feelings and emotions when perhaps you didn't before. And corrective emotional experiences don't always have to be with a romantic partner in the beginning, but it will be important as you move through life. My second recommendation is being curious about your triggers. Are there things that you notice that trigger you more than others? Is it dependent on the situation, the people involved, the environment? When you're more aware of your triggers, you can also pre-plan for them. If you are in a partnership, it'll be really important to have open communication about some of these pieces. What can you take responsibility for on your end, and what can your partner do in order to help you along that process? And my last recommendation is around body awareness. Oftentimes it can be easy to really disconnect from our bodies, especially if we've been through traumatic or hurtful things in the past. So take inventory of what you notice. When you're anxious, how do you know that you feel anxious? What happens in your body? When you feel jealous, how do you know that you're jealous? What happens in your body? When you're starting to feel triggered, how do you know that you're triggered? What happens in your body? The more that you can start being curious and paying attention to some of those signs, the earlier it is that you can tell when you're starting to get triggered or emotionally activated, and then the earlier you can intervene. When you're more aware of your own physical sensations, the easier it is to ground yourself and implement coping tools in those moments. So also play around with different coping tools when you're not triggered to see what feels relaxing, to see what feels grounding, and to see what's helpful. If you have any questions or video recommendations, comment them down below and I will answer any questions that you guys have. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.